Okay, so our portion this week is Tissa, and we're on. I want us to start on page 529 in the Eitz Chaim, the start of chapter 32, and to look at what is really the central focus of the Torah portion. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shekidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. So again, 529 in the Eitz Chaim, chapter 32 of Exodus, I mean. And I just want to point something out about the subdivisions of the portion, what we call aliyot in Hebrew. So each subdivision is an aliyah, and there are always 7 sections, aliyot, to each portion. Usually, each subsection, each aliyah, is like they all have like an average length. Some tend to be a little bit longer than others. They're all based on a particular subject, and it usually makes sense how the portion is subdivided. The interesting thing about Tissa is that the portion actually begins on page 523. So 523 until page 529 is all the first aliyah. That's really long. Now, the second aliyah starts one verse before chapter 32 on 529. It says, you see the Hebrew word in the margin says sheni, shin, nun, yud. So that just tells you that's the where the aliyah break is. So the second aliyah starts there, verse 18, 529, and goes all the way to page 538. That's a really long aliyah. Okay, so 6 pages for the first aliyah and 9 pages for the second aliyah. And then you see, if you keep on looking, 538, you have the third aliyah there, says shlishi in the margin. And the fourth aliyah is on 539 in the middle of the page, right? So the third aliyah is short. The fourth aliyah goes to page 540, so that's pretty short also. The fifth aliyah, pretty short, just one page, 540 and then to 542. The sixth aliyah, 542 to 544. Okay, still relatively short. And then the seventh aliyah, also 544 to 546. Now, all of this is because the rabbis say there are a couple rules for how to make a subdivision of the portion, and also each portion, how each portion is supposed to end and the next portion begins. So you're not supposed to end on a negative note, okay? So something that says God punished Israel, that verse would not be the end of a portion. You don't want to end on something negative like that. And also, if a portion is describing something negative, like the second aliyah is describing the incident of the golden calf, you don't want to break that up. So even though it might make more sense, and it would be easier for the Torah reader to have a shorter portion to read, you don't want to break up a bad story. And so that you get a bad story followed by a bad story followed by a bad story. You just want to just get it over with as one full aliyah. So that's why the second aliyah is like this. The first aliyah then is all about the remaining things that are described that will be fashioned for the tabernacle, and then also the designation of Bezalel as the chief artisan that's supposed to be in charge of the design of all the material for the Mishkan, and also the commandment to observe Shabbat. So all of that is the first aliyah. All of the second aliyah is the golden calf. Another example of a really, really long aliyah is that we have in the book of Leviticus, and also repeated in the book of Deuteronomy, a long list of curses and punishments that would befall the people if they neglected to follow the covenant. So a whole list of punishments, and that's known as in Hebrew as the tochecha, the admonition. It's always done in an undertone. When the Torah reader reads it, it's in an undertone and really fast, because you don't want to focus on the negative images that are being described in that aliyah. So there are portions like that throughout the Torah that deal with negative things that are all bunched together and that make it one long aliyah. So I wanted to start.
That's why it makes it so hard for me as a Levite to have to stand there.
Yeah, that's right. This happens to be the Levi aliyah, and it's also the Levi aliyah, right? So it could have been like the first aliyah could have been subdivided into a couple more portions, but the rabbis didn't do that because the heroes of the golden calf story were the Levites. Okay, so that's why the story has to be the Levi aliyah, because the Levites are the ones who answer Moses's call to punish the people who were singing and dancing around the golden calf. Okay, so that was a. I'm glad you mentioned that, Deborah, because because the first aliyah could have been subdivided into two or three portions, and the golden calf could have been like the fifth aliyah, but the rabbis didn't want to do that. They wanted to highlight the tribe of Levi. So let's. The second aliyah actually starts with verse 18 of chapter 31. So Vayitain el Moshe kechaloto ledaber ito bahar Sinai shnei luchot ha'edut luchot even ketuvim be'etzba Elohim. God gave Moses, when he finished speaking with him on Mount Sinai, I'm inserting God's name into the verse. That's just understood. He gave Moses, when he finished speaking with him on Mount Sinai, the he in the pronoun is God, because it's a capital H for he in the English translation. God gave him 2 tablets of testimony, or 2 tablets of the pact, 2 stone tablets written with the finger of God. So, however that turns out, like I always picture the movie The 10 Commandments, the 1950s movie, where it's fireballs coming at you on the screen, and the fireballs are writing the commandment, right? If you remember, like it's always on before Easter, right? The movie The 10 Commandments. So I've seen it several times, and that's always a pretty vibrant exciting way that Cecil B. DeMille decided to interpret that the tablets are written with the finger of God. So now you could picture, the Sistine Chapel with God's finger touching Adam, right? That famous picture. So you could have like that finger writing the tablet, whatever it is, God wrote it, and it's understood metaphorically as the finger of God. Okay, so now chapter 32. So, okay, so we'll find out. We'll talk in a minute about why the aliyah starts here with verse 18 and not with the first verse of chapter 32. So chapter 32 now starts. Vayar ha'am ki voshesh Moshe laredet min hahar vayikahel ha'am al Aharon vayomru elav kum aseh lanu Elohim asher yelchu lefanenu ki zeh Moshe ha'ish asher ha'elanu me'eretz Mitzrayim lo yadanu me haya lo. The people saw that Moses was delayed, or is delaying, in coming down the mountain. How did they see? Like, how do they know he was delayed? Was there, like, did people have a watch on and that they were keeping track? Like, did they know for sure? We know that Moses was supposed to be on the mountain for 40 days. So why doesn't the Torah tell us on the 41st day after Moses was on the mountain, Moses didn't come down? And then the people came to Aaron. So I just think it's interesting. So we're on Sumner on page 529 in the Eitz Chaim, chapter 32 of the book of Exodus. It's just interesting. How did they see? How did they know? Who told them that 40 days had gone by already and that Moses was delayed? Were the chiefs of the tribes the one keeping track? Was Aaron keeping track? How do we know that he was delayed? But so I don't have an answer to that. It's just something to think about. And so the people gathered, the people congregated. So the Vayikahel Ha'am, the people congregated. So the root, Kuf, Hey, Lamed, Kahal means congregation. Kehillah, like a synagogue, is sometimes known as a kehillah. Like, in other words, the Sharei Tefillah community. We would be a Beit Knesset, a synagogue, but our community would be kehillah. So, and sometimes a synagogue is known as Kehillah Kedoshah, the holy community. So in Hebrew, we could be, our official name could be Kehillah Kedoshah Sha'arei Tefillah. Okay, and it would be two kufs with as the abbreviation, and many synagogues are just known by that, Kehillah Kedoshah, and whatever the name of the synagogue is. So Kehillah is congregation, and usually, well, when it's related to a synagogue, the congregation is congregating for a holy, sacred purpose. So when you have this word here, that the people are congregating around Aaron, so the word is leading us to think that they're congregating around Aaron for a holy purpose. But what is the purpose? They said to him, "Get up and make for us a god." No, make for us God. So the same word that was God at the end of chapter 31 in verse 18 is the word the people are using to ask Aaron to make for us, get up and well, it says in English, come. Kum means get up. Like if you're telling your kid in Israel, a mother tells her kid in Israel to get up in the morning, kum. That's how in modern Hebrew the word kum is. But kum could also be like get up for a purpose. We do this thing now. So kum, get up, make for us God who will go before us. It's in the plural because the English doesn't understand that. But the Hebrew is a plural noun because the word Elohim is a plural word, which is interesting too. Adonai is a singular word, but Elohim is a plural word. It's like water. The word in Hebrew for water, mayim, is a plural word. The word for life, chayim, is also a plural word. The word for sky is shamayim, or heaven. Sky or heaven is a plural word. So it's just interesting that something that would normally in English be singular, sky, water, life is a singular word. In Hebrew, it's plural. What that means, like, I can understand why God would be a plural word because there's so many ways that we understand God, so many ways in which we picture God, or God has so many different aspect of love, compassion, mercy. So all of those aspects being combined into one, you can understand a plural word for that. That makes sense. Okay, so make for us God who will go before us. because this man Moses, Kizeh Moshe Ha'ish, this man Moses, who brought us up out of the land of Egypt, we don't know what happened to him. Okay, so it's just interesting the way the Torah presents this, and there are so many different ways that it could have started the story, like to explain to us how the people knew that he was delayed, to remind us that Moses was supposed to be on the mountain for 40 days and he was late, maybe provide that background. It could have done that. The Torah has done that in other places. But still, somehow the people knew, and we don't know how they know. And they come up with this idea to go to Aaron. Like, so why did they go to Aaron? Did they go to Aaron because Moses was his brother? Did they go to Aaron because he had already been designated as the high priest? We were told that in last week's portion, but did last week's portion happen already? So we don't know when this happened, when chapter 32 happened. It is chapter 32, which comes after the chapters before. But chronologically, in the narrative of the story, does chapter 32 actually come after the previous chapters, which were providing for us the details of the how to build the Mishkan, how to design the vestments, and to set up Aaron and his sons as the Kohanim? Did that prep stuff happen before chapter 32, or did that prep stuff, in other words, the portions Truma and Tetzaveh, did they happen after our portion, after this story of the golden calf? Many commentators think that the golden calf story is put here out of place, and that it should be better understood as happening after the portion Mishpatim, and then Truma, Tetzaveh, Vayakel, and Pekudei should happen in that order. The details of the design, and then the details of the construction of the Mishkan and everything associated with it. So the fact that it's put here in between Truma and Tetzaveh and Vayakel and Pekudei is off-putting, and it throws us off because we think that everything in the Torah as written happens in the order in which it's written. Okay? So now if we understand, like the commentators have, that chapter 32 should really happen after the portion of Mishpatim, when Moses was on the mountain with some of the leaders of the people, offering a sacrifice on an altar that Moses builds on Mount Sinai, and then given the tablets of the commandments because they had heard God speak the 10 commandments, that would make sense. But then if they're speaking to Aaron, that doesn't make sense because Aaron's on Mount Sinai with Moses. So it might make more sense that they're speaking to their tribal leader. Like every tribe has a chief. Maybe it would make more sense that they're speaking to the tribal leader. So what I'm presenting here is that there are questions about when this happened, how they knew that Moses was late, and why are they speaking to Aaron as opposed to anybody else they could have logically spoken to as well. And then, why does the Aliyah start with verse 18 as opposed to the start of chapter 32, which is clearly another topic? And I think it's because what the rabbis wanted us to highlight and to understand, the 10 commandments are written by the finger of God. And that should have been obvious then when the people heard the 10 commandments being spoken by God at Mount Sinai, and then seeing the 10 commandments that Moses was bringing down the mountain. There should be something unusual, special, unique about them that highlights God's relationship with it. So the word Elohim is used there, and then intentionally the contrast with the people wanting Aaron to make Elohim. So they just heard Elohim. Now the people want Aaron to make Elohim. So let's look below the line and see what the commentary here in the Eitz Chaim says about this golden calf that's going to be fashioned. The people, below the line on 530, the people who only a few weeks earlier had been slaves in Egypt, where they had witnessed Egyptian idolatry, could not comprehend a God without physical form, as the second commandment called on them to do. Moses later, in verse 11, refers to your people whom you delivered from the land of Egypt, as if to remind God of the influences to which they had been subjected there. The Midrash compares the situation to that of a man who brought his son a store in a notoriously corrupt neighborhood and then blames the son for having been corrupted there. Right? So Moses reminding God, if you want these people to be monotheistic, you have to understand where they're coming from. They're coming from a pagan country. How do you expect the people to not be influenced by paganism and idolatry? So, because of that influence, after the parentheses, the people needed a visible, tangible symbol of God's presence. Okay, so that's one way to understand the motivation here. So their tangible, visible presence of God's, tangible, visible reminder of God's presence was Moses. Until this point, Moses was speaking on God's behalf, and Moses was also the instrument that brought about the 10 plagues in Egypt and also caused the sea to split for them to leave Egypt, right? So they could understand that all those plagues and the crossing of the sea happened because Moses made it happen by stretching out his arm. So there they saw Moses possibly as God. So now they needed another God. It's interesting that they don't ask Aaron to be that other God. If they knew that Moses was God, maybe his brother would be God. It's also interesting in our egalitarian era, why didn't they ask Miriam to be God? Which might have been even a more logical person to go to, because Miriam is described as a prophetess earlier in the book of Exodus, and she leads the women in song and dance after crossing the sea. So maybe if she's called a prophetess by the Torah, she must have done something that could have been similar to what Moses was doing in stature. So the people could have just as well gone to Miriam and say, you be God. So I'm not so sure the commentary is correct here in that in suggesting the motivation for making a calf, a golden calf, an idol, as opposed to asking a person to take Moses' place. Okay. They had just come from Egypt, where everything, even death, was rendered visible through pyramids and mummies. It was extremely hard for them to grasp the idea that the greatest reality of all is intangible. The text seems to imply that at least some of the people who saw Moses as an embodiment of God wanted the golden calf to replace the vanished Moses, without whom they felt abandoned. According to Hirsch, the people did not understand that God had taken the initiative in reaching down to them, believing that Moses had the power to summon God. Without Moses, how would they ever be able to experience God's presence again? Okay, so I can understand all that, feeling abandoned by Moses, but I'm not sure I understand the leap then to making a golden calf as opposed to asking another person, logically someone related to Moses, to take over. Aaron is consistently portrayed in Jewish lore as a peacemaker and conciliator. Moses was the lawgiver proclaiming standards and prohibitions, the prophet who denounced those who fell short of those standards. Aaron, in his priestly aspect, met and accepted people where they were. Moses proclaimed, "You shall not." Aaron welcomed people who brought their purification offerings to atone for their violations. Legends tell of Aaron's efforts to reconcile feuding individuals. In this instance, however, Aaron's inclination to accept rather than challenge popular will led to misfortune. Okay, so that's a whole other conversation about Aaron's role in the story and why Aaron is still understood by the rabbis to be a good person. Yeah, Lori.
Is there anything special about a calf?
Oh, right. I think that yes. So we'll get to it in verse 4, because above the line there on page 531, the above the line commentary, which explains things in the text without homiletical additions to it, will explain something about it. So we'll get there in a moment. So let's go on. Verse 2. So these are the questions that I have. Why didn't they ask Aaron simply to take over? Why did they ask Aaron to make a god? Etc. Okay. Vayomer aleihem Aharon, parku nizmei hazahav, asher bo'oznei neshechem, benechem uvenotechem, vehaviu elai. So Aaron said to them, "Take off your golden rings that are in your wives' ears, in the ears of your wives, your sons, and your daughters, and bring them to me." So this is just interesting too, that people, women, sons, and daughters wear earrings. Okay, it's golden rings. It says nizmei hazahav. So some kind of ring people wear in their ears. Do they wear them in one ear? Do they wear them in both ears? Do they wear several in both ears? I don't know. The Torah just assumes that we understand that this is common practice for people to wearing this. Now, would slaves be wearing these gold earrings? I don't know. I would think it would be unusual to have something of value being worn by a slave, unless these are the golden rings that they looted from the Egyptians on their way out, or if we want to read it that way in the text, that the Egyptians showered them with gifts on their way out of Egypt. So maybe in celebration, they pierced their ears, or maybe it was clasped on and not pierced. However it is, the Torah assumes we understand, oh yeah, that would be a good way to get some gold. Let's have people take off their rings. Okay? Vayit parku kol ha'am et nizmei hazahav asher ba'ozneihem vayaviu el Aharon. So all the people took off the golden rings that were in their ears, and they brought them to Aaron. Vayikach mi Adam, verse 4, 531. Vayatzar oto bacheret. Vayaasehu egel masecha. Vayomru ele Elohecha Yisrael, asher he'elucha me'eretz Mitzrayim. So he took from their hands. Yes, from their hand. He took from their hand. So it's interesting. Just the Hebrew is intentional here. The Hebrew was intentional when it said in the singular that all the people of Israel were camped at the mountain at Mount Sinai. So it should have said Vayachanu. They were camped. It says instead, and he camped. So they were as one when they were at Mount Sinai, preparing to hear God speak. The same way, they were one. It was one hand that was giving the gold rings to Aaron. Okay, so vayikach means he took. So Aaron took. That should be singular because Aaron's one person. Mi yadam is their hand. So it should be yedehem, their hands, because it's people bringing the gold rings. So it should be yedehem, but it says yadam, their hand. So I just think it's significant that they were all of one purpose in bringing the gold earrings. Not one was disagreeing with it. It was as if they were one person. The whole congregation was one person bringing the gold rings. Okay? So he fashioned it in a mold, and he made a molten calf, and they said, "These are your God, O Israel." It says in the English, "This is your God." So again, Elohim is plural word, so Ele has to be the plural. This is your God, O Israel, who brought you up out of the land of Egypt. So why did he make a golden calf? And what kind of mold did he have? Like, in other words, right, in order to make a golden calf, you have to be pretty talented to work with molten gold in order to create a sculpture. So there had to be some kind of mold for it. Why would there be a mold if God says in the second commandment, "You shall not fashion for me for other gods"? In other words, any molds that you have that were meant to make an idol, you should have broken. So who makes this mold? Or was the mold already there? Or why do slaves have a mold with them to fashion something out of molten metal? So I'm suggesting that this whole process took a while. Yeah, the mold had to be made, and maybe there were artisans there who knew how to do that and could make it pretty quickly, maybe in a couple of days, I don't know. But then he put the molten gold, and you also have to have a high enough flame in order to melt metal too, right? Is this something that slaves would have with them? I don't know. Is it easy to create a furnace hot enough? Like, can you make it from the material that's available in the desert to make a flame hot enough to melt metal, right? It has to be, 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit, something like that, to melt metal, maybe even hotter. You can't just light a match and melt metal over your match, right? Or you can't take two twigs and rub them together and create a spark to create a fire. A bonfire isn't hot enough to melt metal. You have to have some kind of resource to be able to do that. So it's not so easy. And then why the calf? Okay, so all these questions come to mind. Where's the mold coming from? Why do they have the mold? And where are they getting the fire to be hot enough to melt the gold? And why a calf? So above the line on 531 in the right column, calf, Hebrew egel, refers to a young bull. The bull in the ancient Near East was a symbol of lordship, leadership, strength, vital energy, and fertility, and was either deified, that is, made into a god, and worshipped, or used to represent divinity. The Bible views the making of a calf as an idolatrous act. This is clearly shown by the Hebrew plural, Ele Elohecha, literally, these are your gods, in this verse, and in verse 8, translated here as this is your God. The reference here may be to the Canaanite god El, who was represented by a bull. Often, however, the bull or another animal served as a pedestal on which the god stood, elevated above humankind. Right? And there are pictures like this. Okay, so I have a book on my shelf right next to me called, It's a 2-volume book. Pretty, it's amazing I still have books. The Ancient Near East. Okay, so this is volume, an anthology of texts and pictures of imagery of gods and of the ancient Near East. So there is an image of a flying bull, and I'm trying to see if I can find it quickly in the book. And there's a picture of a god riding on a bull. And if you just give me a moment, there we go. Okay, you're not going to be able to see it well, but just a second here. It's this image here. Is that right? No, it's this image.
Yeah.
Just a second here, get my finger here. Okay. That's supposed to be a bull, and that's supposed to be a man on top of the bull. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, so the caption says, "Storm god astride a bull with lightning bolts in his hands." This is from the 8th century BCE. Okay, so it's a little bit later than the time that we're talking about in the Torah, but it was a common image for centuries and centuries. Let's see if I can find another image like that. That one, that was volume 1. I still have some pages dog-eared because in Bible class we had to look at this to understand the context for some stories in the Bible. There are more pictures in here. I just want to see. There's pictures of bulls, statues of bulls.
Rabbi, was that from an Egyptian tomb or from?
So it had the name where it was from, but it didn't say where. So I don't know. So anyway, there are Canaanite and Egyptian imagery, and then before pre-Canaanite, Sumerian, whatever. Okay, so now the comment continues. The young bull made by Aaron may then have been a pedestal on which the invisible God of Israel was believed to be standing. That is, God's presence would be left to the imagination. Clearly, the people associated the manufactured image with the God who directs history, not with a deity possessing mythologic associations. For Aaron proclaimed in verse 5 that the following day would be a festival of the Lord. The people, in demanding a god because of Moses' disappearance, wanted an appropriate visible object that would recall the divine presence in their midst. See also Jeroboam's bulls in 1 Kings 12, 26-30. So Jeroboam was Solomon's son, who set up a rival kingdom after Solomon died in the northern kingdom of Israel and set up a temple there with these deified bulls. So it's a common image in the ancient Near East to have bulls as God figures. So that's why an egel, or a young bull, would have been chosen. It's just a natural kind of picture. But it's not natural when in chapter 20 we're told not to have, we're not supposed to make a molten image of God. We're not supposed to bow down to an idol. Yes, Lori.
Yeah. Why in the world would Aaron participate in this?
So
Yeah,
why?
because he played a key role. It wasn't,
Yes. So the reason is the rabbis explain it that based on the people congregating around Aaron, which I explained there, the congregating, that usually it's for a sacred purpose, and here, well, it's for a different sacred purpose of making an idol, could also be understood perhaps as in a violent or a threatening way. So the Midrash has one story which explains that we're supposed to remember that when the people of Israel fought the Amalekites, right after they crossed the sea and before they got to Mount Sinai, that the way Moses had told Joshua, prepare the people to fight the Amalekites, and then he asked Aaron and another man named Hur to climb a hill that was overlooking the battle, and to hold up Moses' arms. And as long as Moses' arms were raised, then the people would be victorious in battle. And we never hear about Hur again. We hear about Joshua again, we hear about Aaron again, but we don't hear from Hur ever again. So the Midrash suggests, what happened to Hur? Let's create a story. Let's point out the more evil intentions of the people of Israel around the golden calf. Let's say that the people were threatening Aaron with violence. Build us this golden calf. So they said, the rabbis did, Hur tried to intervene and said, no, don't worry, Moses is coming down soon, or whatever he said, to try to mollify the people. People weren't buying it, and they killed Hur. So that explains how bloodthirsty the people were, and how angry they were, and would explain then why Aaron, who is the peacemaker, saying, okay, I'll do what you want, just let me stay alive, which he doesn't say here in the Torah, but that what the rabbis say, okay, I'll do whatever you want. I'll make this golden calf. So that is, for the rabbis, filling in some gaps in the story, or adding more details to the story to kind of make Aaron look better and make the people look worse. Okay, here in the story, it doesn't sound like there's evil intent. It sounds like there's a big mob, but it's unclear if it's an unorganized mob. Is it an angry mob? It's a mob that has an intention, right? That has some kind of, they're speaking and they have an idea. It's like there's somebody with a bullhorn speaking on behalf of the whole crowd. Hey, Aaron, make for us a god to replace Moses. And Aaron says, okay, give me all your gold. Maybe he thought, and this is reasonable to think, by asking them to give up their gold earrings, it's a delaying tactic, and maybe the people would say, really, I have to give this up? Now, think also, the people already, if this chapter happened in order, the people already gave up stuff to build a Mishkan. So what stuff do they have left? The stuff that's really important to them is left, right? Other things they give up. Okay, we'll make the sanctuary. I'm willing to give this up, this precious textile or this precious metal I'll give up to make the Mishkan, but I'll keep these gold earrings because these are really important to me. And now Aaron is asking for those really important leftover things to be given too. And maybe that would stop the crowd in their tracks saying, okay, we get your point. Is there something else that we can do to make a god with? But they don't offer that, and they give up the gold. So it's just something else to think about, the details of the story. And when did the story happen? Did it happen in order? Did it not happen in order? Did they have the gold available for the gold earrings? Did they not have the gold available? Or what was the tone of the crowd? Were they peaceful or were they angry? And that's why the rabbis came up with the story of Hur being killed by them.
Right. And God was very lenient.
Well, that's the other thing, that God forgives the people, but God originally says to Moses, Look, go down and look at the people and look what they're doing. And then Moses, which we don't have the time, we're not going to have the time to read, Moses decides to, who's with me, who did not participate in singing and dancing. The tribe of Levi says, we're with you. And he asks the Levites to kill all the people. Like
Right.
he
But
grinds
not
up,
Aaron. But not Aaron.
not Aaron, right?
Yeah.
Because Aaron is designated still to be the Kohen. Yes, so how does that, right? But again, if Aaron was forced, physically forced to do this because Hur was just murdered in front of him, then Moses can understand that it was against Aaron's will. But God, besides grinding up the golden calf, mixing it with water, forcing the people to drink it, the Levites also killed the people who were singing and dancing. And then Moses goes up the mountain and prays for everybody else's forgiveness. And God says, no, I want to kill them all and want to start over with you as the father of the people. And Moses says, no, I'd rather be blotted out from the book than to be the father of the people. Please forgive the people. And God acquiesces and forgives the people and reestablishes the covenant again at the end of the portion. So it's a complicated story that kind of which all takes place around Yom Kippur, according to the rabbis, which also then adds another layer to why we observe Yom Kippur every year. And that perhaps one reason to observe Yom Kippur is to still ask forgiveness for this original communal sin of the golden calf. We're still trying, and the offering of sacrifices on Yom Kippur is to atone for what happened at Mount Sinai with the golden calf. So there are a lot of layers to the story which get to the underlying spiritual nature of the people and how difficult it was for the people of Israel to accept the idea that there is one God who can't be seen. And the rest of the Bible is all about the people not really being able to buy into that. And all of their sins that lead to their exile and to the destruction of the first temple in Jerusalem, because the people still have not been able to fully comprehend and accept this one unseeable, all-powerful God. Any other questions or comments?
Yes.
Yeah, Barbara.
If you say that everyone gave their gold, who was left for Moses to? Not, yeah, when Moses says.
Oh, I see. Right. So I guess everyone in the crowd, maybe not everyone of the entire people of Israel. So it was 3,000 people who were killed by the Levites who were dancing around. So maybe it was just those 3,000 people who gave their gold. So that's a good point. And yeah, so maybe not everybody participated of the whole 600,000 people of Israel. Yeah. Any other questions or comments? Okay, very good. So we'll stop here for today. And yeah, we'll see you next week with Torah study. Have a good day, everybody, and happy Purim.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.